Deputy O'Snodaigh.
Margaret, and I want to thank everybody who has turned out today. I think it's been a very useful exposition of some of the issues relating to this bill, and I've taken an interest in the last year or so in trying to address, I think, a shortfall in Irish law, and it's interesting how, if you want, the government has moved in that period, and this bill is welcome, but hopefully this process will inform the department and the minister to make changes that are required so that we can have, if you want, the best possible legislation at the end of this. This is a new process which has happened only a number of occasions with legislation, and that's why it's welcome that you have the likes of yourselves here, and the department officials. There's a number of questions I'll ask at this stage just of the department. One, I presume, would probably be asked by a number of people as relates to the age barrier and the criticism that the Ombudsman for Children has made. And are you aware of those, and is it the intention to look again at the age of 18 and the suggestion that that should be reduced? The second one is in relation to the requirement that somebody isn't in a marriage or in a civil partnership. Have you sought the view of the Attorney General to see whether it's constitutional to put a ban on somebody who is married from gaining other rights? It seems to be a contradiction, and I know it is one of the contradictions which delayed the publication of legislation for the last number of years. But just I would be concerned that having gone this far and producing a piece of legislation, that then it will fall at the first legal challenge, and we then start all over again. And finally, in the heads of the bill, it suggests a definition. What definition is going to be used? There are a number of definitions in the international field, and there's a number of wordings, and they have different implications then on the legislation. So has that definition of gender identity been chosen at this stage?
Okay. I
wasn't suggesting really that the Act, because we all here hope that progress will be made by this legislation, but if this provision remains as it is, it would be open then for somebody to challenge it. And given that discrimination can't happen on 9 grounds at the moment, given that the Constitution protects marriage, it is one of the problematic provisions within this bill where you would force a couple to divorce. Yes, in an ideal world we would have same-sex marriage, and that would deal with that hiccup that we have in our society, and hopefully we'll see that issue addressed shortly. But in the meantime, we have this provision in front of us, and I think we need to be imaginative enough to accept that there are happily married couples, and that for them to continue to remain as a couple, as married couple or in a civil partnership, that the state would be forcing them to divorce, which means that they'd have to live apart for 4 years. And it's just one of the areas I think we need to tease out, and if at all possible, I agree with Senator Power that the department, if they could share some of the advice, some of the legal background, or ask the Attorney General whether she would have a problem, or the Minister himself, to come before us just to help us out on this, because it will be, I know, if the bill is published in the way it's suggested, it will be one of the sticking points for most of the people that I've talked to on this legislation.
Deputy O'Snodaigh and Deputy Griffin.
There's a number of issues, and I was told to keep my first comments brief, so I kept a few questions back. Has there been account taken of Austria's decision, which saw that there couldn't be a requirement to divorce, or that, and I think Germany followed suit 2006, 2008. Has that been taken into account? And that might be what you were saying, that there's different views as to how to address that. But they wouldn't be seen as the most progressive in terms of this type of legislation in any shape or form yet. Kind of people had to go to the court to try and ensure that the legislation which gave recognition didn't force divorce or a split in partnership. The other question is, from the time of application to the time of granting of certificate, what do you expect the time frame to be? Will it be immediate once all of the 3 or 4 criteria that's mentioned in the heads are satisfied, or will there be delays, certain time frames to allow for the department to look at it? Because at the moment, for instance, like naturalisation takes 6 to 7 years in this country from application. So, do you expect that type of time frame, or will it be more instantaneous? Something that, as people were talking about, say, those over 18 in the legislation, and kind of discussion here was to move that to 16. Does this legislation, or has it been considered that parents can apply to have gender recognition changed, kind of in instances where either it's medically obvious or kind of in the case, so for instance, intersex or indeterminate sexes? Because just from a quick reading again, because it's just something I hadn't taken note of, it doesn't seem that in that case, so are you then condemning a child who has had a diagnosis at birth of being male to wait until they're 18, despite the fact kind of that they are obviously female from an early age? Is that covered in this legislation? And kind of we've concentrated, and I thank the representative here, on the specifics in the bill, kind of, and we haven't heard in some ways, bar Andy there, the personal testimony, just how urgent this is for people who are stuck in a situation kind of where the state isn't recognising them. I've heard those testimony myself, and it's a pity. I know we're dealing with legislation, but it's a pity that people outside don't hear it, because this is quite a complex issue kind of to grapple with. You're dealing with quite a range of concepts, kind of the medical issues that Professor O'Shea has meant. Kind of we're dealing with legislation, but then for the individual, there will be every single individual case will be different in their own ways, and trying to capture them all in legislation is hard. And I think kind of we've made major progress from where I thought the government were going, or the department were going in the past, and I welcome that. All I'm trying to do is to try and ensure that whatever comes out at the end of this is the best possible, and that we've learned from all of the other jurisdictions around the world who have also grappled with the same questions we have, and they've come out in different ways, and that we can set a standard through our legislation that others will follow, rather than us kind of ignoring the mistakes others made and repeating them in the legislation. Some have been learned, others I think haven't.
Deputy O'Snodaigh.
Very brief, and I must apologise in advance. Kind of the social welfare bill will be starting after our business, so I'm the spokesperson, so I'm stuck trying to be 2 places at once. So if I disappear, I think it's been a very useful exercise, and I thank everybody. And it's interesting, right across the board. Yesterday we had a good airing on kind of the same issues that have come up here today, but I think that's been useful. There's 1 or 2 questions, and I'll keep them very brief. And if I'm not here when you're answering, I'll look at the transcript afterwards. One is to Yvonne. I was interested in the temporary cert that was mentioned. To elaborate further, because when I asked yesterday about what to do with those under 16, I was told, well, kind of the 2004 Act would deal with intersex, and obviously they don't properly deal with it, as we've heard today from the court case that was mentioned. Also, I just want to ask Dr. Philip Crowley, just yesterday we heard mention of the capacity of the health service. What is the capacity in terms of gender reassignment operations, and the fact that there's limited physicians, even if that restriction is still in place, there are still limited physicians in Ireland who could make an assessment if that was required under the current legislation. So the other questions I raised yesterday, I got good answers yesterday, and I think they're well reflected today.